Welcome to 2A Cops. In this episode, we're going to talk about gun control and specifically 3 polls that were done where they interviewed police officers. And we'll show you the data that was retrieved from that so you can see what cops really think about gun control. Don't forget to stop by our sponsor, PSA. We know that magazines and ammunition and AR-15s are in short supply, but they seem to have a good supply of them. Don't forget to click on our link and head on over there. Welcome to 2A Cops, Cops Supporting Gun Rights. Our hosts, Keith and Matt, have over 50 years combined experience as police officers serving in California. In this podcast, we'll talk about all things related to the Second Amendment from a cop's perspective and dispel the myth that cops are for over-the-top gun control. Hello, welcome to 2A Cops. I'm your host, Keith Graves.
And I'm Matt Silby.
And today we are going to talk about what cops think about gun control. In our last episode, we talked about gun control. And we talked about just the fallacy of gun control and how it doesn't work. But we want to give you the data of what cops are thinking about gun control and what's really going to happen. Because politicians love passing a law and then saying the cops are going to arrest you if you don't comply without asking the cops, are they really going to do it? Which the answer is most likely not. So we've been ignoring some laws. I mean, some laws we're not going to ignore, like murder, rape. You know, you're driving 40 miles an hour in a 25 through a school zone when the kids are walking on the sidewalk. Stuff like that's pretty obvious. But politicians love doing things like needing a background check for ammunition that we know is just stupid. So we're going to talk about what everybody thinks about that. We're going to talk about 3 polls. 2 were done by us, 2A Cops. The 3rd was done by PoliceOne. Why is it important? Because the Dems are pushing hard on a gun control agenda that is really going to be harmful to the American public, and it is not going to make us safer. So our first poll we did last year, and we did it because we wanted to show, it was when we started 2A Cops, and we wanted to show everybody that cops don't support gun control. It is definitely not a scientific study, but it is in line with what Matt and I know from talking to cops every day. In our first poll, we asked specifically, do you support the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms? 100% of the respondents, which were just about 1,000 respondents, 100% said yes. Matt, is that in line with what you're seeing?
For the most part, yeah. Like I said in one of the previous episodes, out of the 1,800 or so cops I worked with over 22 years, I knew one who was not for private gun ownership. 1 out of 1,800. So yeah, that's pretty close. I mean, that's going to be like 99.9% or something like that.
And cops tend to like guns, and cops tend to want guns and have the guns that everybody wants to outlaw. And obviously they don't agree with that. Our second question was, do you think there needs to be more gun control legislation? 86% of the respondents said no. 8% said yes, and 5% remained neutral. So when we looked at the text responses, that 8% that said they wanted more gun control, everything in there had to do with mental health. And Matt, why would the cops be out there? Why would you have 8% that would say yes, more gun control, but because of mental health reasons?
Well, in your daily dealings with people, most of the people that you're encountering that have done, say, committed a suicide or done some irrational shooting, like mall shootings, school shootings, stuff like that, most of those people are having mental health issues. So when you see that as a common theme, I can see where it would tend to make you think something that maybe legislation might be a solution to that. I don't believe that, but I think that I can see where people would start to get that idea.
Exactly. It comes down to perspective.
Right.
A little bit. A majority of the cops said they don't want any more legislation, and there were some good text responses in there. One that I really like was written by a guy who says, I was shot in the line of duty. I don't blame the firearm, but the convicted felon who shot me. Oh, wait, according to the law, he shouldn't have had it. And that's a common theme too. We do see a lot of cops that have been shot. Matt, you've been involved in 2 shootings, and I'm sure you don't blame the gun, but the person, correct?
No, correct. For that matter, I had, like I mentioned again previously, 5 different coworkers were shot and killed over my career. One of them was a guy I went to the academy with and was friends with. That guy was shot by a convicted felon who was actually out on bail at the time. He was let out by a liberal California judge. He should have been in jail. He had major pending felony charges and a long history of fleeing from the cops and everything else. And he had a illegally acquired AK that he shot my friend with and killed him. I still don't blame the gun.
Same. I've had, you and I both had a friend murdered this year, Stephen.
Yep.
And none of our friends group, blame the gun, but the actual person that did it. And you can't be a cop and not know somebody that's died in the line of duty. And I think most cops feel the way we do. Some of the other comments in there were tougher penalties and less probation and parole.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, I mean, we're tired of seeing people get probation for just major serious crimes when they should be in. How many violent crimes do you go to where the guy's on probation or parole?
No, there's the old joke: are you on probation or parole? Not are you on some sort of formal. It's either which one are you on, not are you on one.
Exactly. Another comment here: many existing laws should be struck down. We all agree with that.
Yeah.
They need to prosecute the laws already in place. I see hardcore criminals get arrested for gun crime, for stuff that's on the book that's legit, like, dealing drugs while armed with a loaded operable firearm
in a school
and
zone.
Being a felon in possession.
Yeah.
And then they won't charge any of the gun crimes.
At best, they get a parole violation or something. Exactly.
They give them a probation violation and we're done, right? But then some guy doesn't follow the proper registration on his assault weapon or so-called assault weapon, and it's honestly an innocent mistake. It's not one done on purpose, and then they'll hammer the guy with a felony.
Right.
Yeah, it's stupid. Let me just scroll down here to the bottom. There's a lot of responses. So the third question we asked is, do you think any of these gun control laws are unconstitutional? 15% said all gun laws are unconstitutional, meaning like there should be no gun laws whatsoever. 42% said the NFA, so the National Firearms Act, that means machine guns, silencers, short barrel rifles, and short barrel shotguns, that law is illegal. 42% said that basically everybody should have a machine gun or a silencer or what have you. When it comes to prohibition of so-called assault rifles, 80% felt that was unconstitutional and shouldn't be passed. Being a convicted felon in possession of a gun, 9% thought that felons should have guns, and 60% were opposed to red flag laws. And I got to tell you, I thought the numbers would have been higher, especially when it comes to red flag laws. I really thought more cops would have been against the red flag laws.
Agreed. The only thing I can figure, since the respondents are nationwide, they're probably from states where red flag laws don't exist, whereas you and I come from a state that's had different types of red flag laws on the books for a long time.
Well, let's get down to where I put in there in this poll, what type of state do you work in? Only 25% were in one that heavily regulates firearms, but 55% were in ones that, 55% were in one that rarely regulates firearms.
Okay.
Those living in free America. And then there's another 21% that said that they don't regulate firearms now, but it's coming. So a majority of the officers in here lived in red states, that didn't regulate firearms.
Right.
So
the only thing I can figure is that as far as the red flag laws go, I don't know. I totally disagree with them because I've seen firsthand how they're abused.
Exactly. And we've seen them we've seen them abuse like own agencies against their own officers.
Right.
On top of that, and if command staff is likely to abuse their own officer with a red flag law, what are they going to do to a citizen?
Exactly.
But the one question I didn't ask in that poll, and everybody let me know it, was, well, and this comes back to the second poll, that if a law was passed to confiscate semi-auto guns like AR-15s and AK-47s, will you take part in seizing the guns under the new law? Out of all those that polled on the second time around, only one person said they would. And Matt, you had a good observation about what would happen to that one guy that was going to go seize semi-auto rifles.
Yeah, besides just being ostracized, he's probably going to get a sock party in the locker room.
And then go out on a medical retirement.
Exactly, yeah. He's going to be the guy going to calls by himself because no one will back him up.
And so
they'll probably very quickly be put in line.
Exactly. And I wrote in the article, when I published this poll, I wrote in the article that you have to understand that peer pressure doesn't stop at the police station door. There's a huge amount of peer pressure in a police agency for doing the right thing and not embarrassing everybody. And when it comes time, like right now, we're in the middle of the mask mandates with all this stuff. And the big thing going around police departments right now is don't be the guy that's going to issue a citation for not wearing a mask, which is why you see so few out there.
Right. And most of the interactions with masks come down to not actually getting cites for the masks, but they're getting cited for stuff like trespass because they refuse to leave the business that's asking them to leave. It's not actually a citation for the mask.
Exactly, which is the business's right to throw them out if they don't want to follow through. But, here you have one person out of everybody that said that they would seize weapons. So the next question was, if a Biden administration requires owners of semi-automatic firearms like the AR-15 to be registered, would you seize any unregistered firearms that you came across? 95% said no. 5% said yes. And so when we look at the responses for a yes, the 5% that said they would take it, I think they were overanalyzing the question. So it depends on the situation, right? And I'm guessing that the officer, when he said depending on the situation, he's probably thinking like, I've got a gang member that just shot up a house, and now I've got the gun in front of me. Am I going to charge him for that? Well, probably he is,
Right. Not just I encounter a guy on a vehicle stop who's done nothing gun-related whatsoever.
Here, the answer is actually maybe, depending on the circumstances, who I'm dealing with and why I'm dealing with them.
Yep.
Here's the last one is if the registering is deemed constitutional, which this officer is saying it's basically gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's deciding that this is constitutional, then I would have to follow the law by oath. Registering is not prohibiting ownership, it just sucks. But then when we look at the responses for the no's, the 95% of cops that are not going to do anything, they don't care. Registration is the first step to confiscation. Some of them are quite humorous, like not just no, but fuck no.
Somebody who speaks my language,
right? Yeah, that's a good street cop right there. Another good one. I give them a warning to register, just like I do with unregistered autos. Meaning that officer's just like, whatever, man. Hey, just register it. See you later, and then go about his day. Let's see. Registration leads to confiscation, commie bastards. Here's cops over analyzing it. Assuming this would be a federal code, well, I can't enforce said law. So for those that don't know, state cops can't, or, cops in your state, local cops can't enforce federal law. Federal agents can't enforce state law. So here, this cop is just analyzing well, that's a federal code, so not my problem. It's against the Second Amendment. I'm not going against the oath that I took as an officer, and I won't go against the oath that I took. So you see a lot of people taking their oath very seriously. And that's been what I've seen from cops in California, which is the most heavily gun-controlled state in America. What's it like in a red state like, Idaho, or is Texas red? Are they still red?
They're still red.
They're flip-flopping though.
Yeah,
they're making me nervous.
Yeah, they're red leaning purple, I think, at this point.
You guys voted for Beto O'Rourke. I'd be ashamed. All the Texans right now are getting angry.
Yeah.
All right. So, Matt, let's talk about the PoliceOne poll, because that was of a significant number of cops that were polled in that one.
Correct. Yeah, they did this survey back in 2013, so Obama presidency, and there was a whole bunch of proposed gun control laws that were trying to make their way through the House and the Senate and stuff like that. So they had been proposed those laws, and so it was, politically speaking, very similar kind of to the environment we're finding ourselves in right now, at least with the supposed Biden victory. So it was a very large survey. They had 15,595 verified cops, either active or retired, that responded to the survey. And I saw it in here somewhere. Let me double check real quick. It was, I lost it now. But the majority of the people that responded to it were still actively employed. Here it is right here. So 76% of the people responded were actively employed, and only 18% were retired. So it was actively working cops. It was almost over 15,000 people responded to it, and they asked a ton of questions. But the ones the big takeaways for me, let me look at them here real quick. Question number. So I pulled up. There's a bunch of different. PoliceOne did several different articles, but they all link back to a PDF that has the responses for all of the questions. So when I list a number for the question, it's coming off of that list of all the questions. So number 13 in their survey was, do you believe that use of a firearm while perpetrating a crime should result in stiff mandatory sentences with no plea bargains? I was actually surprised the number was as low as it is, and it's not a low number. It was 91.4%. No's was only 5.4%, and then 3.2% were unsure. I mean, does that sound kind of what you would expect, Keith?
Yeah, I didn't think the numbers would be that drastic.
I figured it would be like 99.5% or something even higher than that. So, but then again, this is a nationwide survey, so some people probably have DA's offices. Like in Idaho, you do a crime, they hammer you. You and I come from an environment where you do a crime and the DA is going to do everything they can to plea bargain it. So I'm assuming some of that's got to do with their frame of reference.
Yeah, and to give a lot of our followers aren't cops, and just to give them a frame of reference, we're seeing people in Idaho get, like, as an example, my son's a police officer here, and he's arrested one guy that I've arrested in California, and he arrested him here. The time that he's doing, he's going to do years in state prison, and in California, he would have only got probation. That's a huge difference between blue states and red states.
And even in California, it varies by county too. So the busier counties, people are getting off much lighter than they do in less crime-ridden counties. Mm-hmm. Early in my career, I arrested a guy after he rammed me head-on intentionally with a vehicle, knowing I was a cop. Assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer, right? Mm-hmm. The county I was in gave him 6 months probation. He had done a couple of vehicle burgs the night before in a different county that's got a much lower crime rate, and he ended up going to prison from that other county's case.
Wow.
But he rammed me head-on with a car, and he got a couple of months of probation. So you and I look at things differently, and it's funny because states that have lower crime rates tend to hammer people with jail and prison time, which is probably why they have lower crime rates. It's funny how that works. When the bad guys are locked up, they're not out committing crime.
Exactly.
Moving on to the next question. I had this page out of order. My bad. This is question number 11. Hang on, let me go to. There we go. Now I'm in order. Question number 9. Should citizens be required to complete a safety training class before being allowed to buy a gun? This is one of those ones where I completely disagree with with almost the majority of the respondents. So that it was split almost 50-50 as far as yeses and nos. The no's were 43.3% and yes was 42.3%.
So what was the percentage that thought that they should have to go through some type of training first?
Was 42.3. So
Wow.
1% less than the cops who said no. And again, this I think is probably going to be one of those frame of reference things. I don't think that you should be required to have any kind of class before buying a gun.
Same.
And California has required that for a long time. But again, I think this is probably because cops tend to, you go to the accidental shootings enough.
Yes.
You go to stuff like that often enough and you see it repeatedly, you start thinking, well, maybe if that person had training, that wouldn't have happened.
Exactly. And, I mean, you've been to them too. I can think of all the accidental discharges where somebody got shot. And I could see where some cops would think that. I mean, you and I are obviously looking at it a little bit differently because we're very pro 2A, like more so than other cops. And even though they are pro 2A, we're looking as an infringement. They're looking at like, I'm tired of going to people shooting themselves by accident because and you got to admit, some of the things that these people do to accidentally shoot themselves are pretty fucking stupid.
Yeah. Well, and cops aren't immune to that either. Remember that video of the one FBI agent that was dancing, did a flip, his gun fell out, and then he had an AD?
No, the DEA agent.
The DEA agent in the classroom who shoots himself in the foot.
I'm the only one qualified to operate this Glock, and he shoots himself.
Yeah. So cops aren't immune to doing stupid stuff with guns, and you know what? Every one of those guys had training. So
we're proof that training doesn't help.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's exactly true. And my feeling on training is every responsible gun owner should seek training, and they should continually train, not just the one-time class and call it good. But that's just because you want it. Just like driving, you don't just go learn. You don't just learn to drive and then not do it for 15 years and then figure that you're going to be just as good as somebody who does it every day.
Yeah,
it's one of those practice makes perfect things. So as long as it's good practice.
And then for our listeners, we got to ask you, what are you doing to really help other people get that training? So as an example, yesterday, my neighbors they'd shot a gun here and there, but never owned one. So they finally bought a gun like everybody else in America right now. And so, we went up to the range and I taught them how to shoot. And we spent a good 2 hours up there, going over the basics, from the 4 safety rules all the way down to, how to clean your gun and, how to shoot. And it's imperative that we all get those people involved and give them some kind of training, But I'm shocked at the number, though. I really thought more cops would be more ambivalent about the training issue.
Agreed.
What's up next?
All right. Number 11 on the survey was, do you support the concept of a national database tracking all legal gun sales? So gun registry, right? Mm-hmm. Yes was 23%. Even. No was 70%. And then unsure was 7.1. So I guess some people just didn't even answer. So the no's is pretty much, I would expect a little bit higher than that. But then again, you're talking about different frames of reference again. The whole purpose of a database, I mean, tracking guns, knowing who legally purchased that gun is not solving a crime. So I don't understand the concept of wanting that.
And I think so. 2 things here. 70% is a clear majority of cops could care less about national tracking, right? Is that how that number's going, right?
So yeah, correct. And actually, right. I'm an idiot and I can't do math. 23 plus 7 is actually 30%. So yeah, there was 100% of the respondents.
So 70% don't care, and that's because we know that criminals don't use guns that they purchase somewhere that's going to be tracked, and we already have a tracking system. For the most part, if when you buy a gun, you fill out the 4473
from a dealer. You mean?
from a dealer, and that stays at your dealer's filing cabinet forever, basically.
Right.
And then when they go out of business, it gets shipped to ATF, and there is literally Connex boxes upon Connex boxes at the ATF in Virginia, just full of 4473s. And if they wanted to, they can track down this serial number, find out who made it, which distributor it went to, which dealer it went to. They contact the dealer for the 4473, and they can see who it got sent to. So it's just more laborious to figure out who that gun went to.
Well, and that only tracks the first sale of the gun, though, too.
Exactly.
So in states where... Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing is we do have tracking in California.
Yes, correct. And how many crimes has it solved?
None for me. And I was pretty active. I work gangs and narcotics. That's all about guns.
Right.
And, I can tell you right now, we do have a system where you find a gun, you can run the serial number, and it's supposed to come back and tell you exactly who it belongs to right now if everybody followed the law. That gun, the one time I called a guy, I'm like, hey, your gun was used in this gang shooting. And he's like, no, my gun's right here. No, it's not. I'm holding it. And he went into his gun safe and he's like, it's missing. Long, convoluted story, but it turned out somebody in his family had stolen it and he just didn't know. That's the only time it ever helped me.
Gotcha.
And to be honest, it doesn't help enough to do an infringement on everybody's rights.
Right, but people are going to argue that that's not infringement on your rights, and then I get into I'm with one of those people that you answered earlier, or the quote earlier from one of the respondents was, registration leads to confiscation.
Yep. And we've seen that because they had that in California. Remember the whole SKS fiasco?
Yep.
Remember that where people allowed these SKSs to be imported into California, which violated California law. They all got sold, and they went back and confiscated everybody's gun.
Right, because they were able to, because they tracked it, and they knew who had them at the time.
Yep.
So, and then, you look further back into history, and there's plenty of countries that required registration before they went around rounding up all the guns. But, people's, that can never happen in America. I don't know. Yeah, it can.
Look, who would have thought I like telling people, if you're a time traveler from 2 years ago, and you showed up today, you'd be telling yourself, go build a bunker and go hide in it. But because we're dealing with it, we're trying to find reasons for it, and we're trying to that's just 2020,
Yeah, we're
not realizing this shit ain't normal, man. And you should all be scared of what the government's doing right now.
Yep.
All right, what's up next?
Moving on. Number 16. Do you believe a gun buyback or turn-in programs can have an effective have been effective in reducing the level of gun violence? 81.5% said no, but shocking 11.2% said yes. I don't get that. You can go look at the people that are turning in guns. They're not criminals that are gangbangers.
No.
The Crip in LA is not turning his gun in to get a free turkey.
All right, so public service announcement. For you heroes that build a operable firearm for $5 from stuff from Ace Hardware and turn that in to get your $100 gift certificate, we love you.
Exactly.
Or the guys that put up shop before the line says, we'll buy all your guns that you're trying to turn in, and then they do private exchange within the law. Before giving them top dollar for a good gun that they're going to turn around and sell again. I love that.
So I worked in our main administration building for a couple of years, and I was friends with the guy who worked the front counter. And it disgusted him because if somebody walked in the door with a gun they wanted to turn in, this is not doing the, here's your gift card kind of thing. This is just people who want to turn in guns.
Yes.
A lot of times it was like a widow whose husband died, and so they'd bring in the guns because they don't know what to do with them. Go to a gun store and sell them to them. Anyway, so they would bring these guns in, and they're bringing in legitimate collector's items, Series 1 Colt single action armies, stuff like that. And every one of those guns was going to get destroyed. It was just disgusting.
Oh, we had 2 matching John Wayne 1894 Winchesters with serial numbers 1 number apart.
Yeah.
And so we took them and we actually framed them. We got a court order to check them out for department use.
Okay.
And then hung them up in our hallway because nobody could stand to see them get hurt.
Yeah, it's you're talking about just destroy. Well, look at the country now, destroying history, tearing down statues.
Yeah.
So people really don't give a crap about, that poor gun got melted down. At least people who are destroying all that stuff don't.
Yeah, you see like a lot of war trophies too. Guys coming in with German MP40s or like an AK-47 from Vietnam. Something that's got history, and it's like it hurts to see those. I mean, like if you got somebody cool in the property room, like we would write court orders to divert them back to department use, and then that way you can train officers on all these different types of guns and how to make them safe or whatever excuse you want to make, just so they don't get melted.
Right.
But I don't think the general public realizes how nice of guns come in the front lobby to get disposed of.
Right, exactly. These aren't the things that were taken off of bad guys on the street that are getting destroyed, which for the most part, a lot of those guns I could care less about. They're a dime a dozen, it's high points and crap like that. Yeah. But when you're talking about actual legitimate historical firearms that are worth thousands of dollars, it's just insane to melt them.
It makes you cry.
Yep. All right.
A few guys each time.
So these next two questions are kind of linked, and even though they're a number apart. So we got 20 and then 22. So 20 is on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being high. How important do you think legally armed citizens are to reducing overall crime rates? 54.7% rated that as highest. So a 5, 54.7%, and then 4 was 21.7%. So you're at what, 75% already.
So wait, 75%
thought it was high or higher.
Okay.
That legally armed people reduce the overall crime rate.
Okay.
So the whole armed society is a polite society thing.
Got it.
And this is 75% of the cops rated it high or very high, I guess. Then 22 was considering the particulars of recent tragedies like Newtown and Aurora. So this is kind of dating the survey. What level of impact do you think a legally armed citizen could have made? Choose the statement you feel is most accurate. 80% of the respondents, 11,215 cops, said casualties would likely have been reduced. So that tells you right there that the cops think that private citizens will do the right thing in a bad situation.
So I totally see that. All the cops I know want to see citizens be able to exercise their Second Amendment right and to be able to carry concealed whenever they want. And you and I have lived in the two extremes. We've lived in where nobody can have a concealed weapon and nobody can have guns. And then now we live in a state where we have constitutional carry, where anybody can carry a gun concealed as long as you can lawfully own one.
Yep.
And look at the crime rate between our two states.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's funny because, talking to the cops here, how, I asked them, well, like, what does that cause a problem? All these people, with a gun, like, do you change your tax? They're like, no, everybody has a gun. It's fine. Like,
yeah, they're used to it.
Yeah, we're like you and I, where we worked, the only people that had guns were the criminals.
Yeah. Well, I encountered a couple people on a fairly regular basis. It was like a tow truck driver who had a CCW. So it wasn't,
really?
Yeah, but he was always doing repos and he had a CCW.
I think it depends on where you work because
you worked in a county that didn't issue permits.
I mean, we're working in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I encountered one person in 30 years that had a concealed carry permit.
Oh, see, I encountered them a lot.
I asked him if I could look at it because I wanted to see what one looked like. And he laughed. He's like, well, do you want to look at the gun? I'm like, no, man, I don't care. I just want to see your permit. Like. And he showed it to me, and I'm like, hey, if you got to go, it's all good, man. I'm just going to give you a warning. I just want to see what it looks like. And he's like, oh, you're good. We had the best conversation. And I'm like, what kind of gun you got? This says like you can only carry. And I had to ask him. I'm like, this says it has to be a Glock 19. And he's like, no, I have a Glock. He's getting all paranoid. No, I have a Glock 19. And I'm like, no, man, I don't care about that. I got one too. But like, can you carry? Like, I'm having him explain to me how it works.
Right.
How he got it. Can you really carry another gun? What if you wanted two guns? What if you don't want to carry a Glock 19? You want to accessorize for your dinner party and you want to carry like a PPK or something. You know,
there is appropriate times when, you got your tux on and you're going to be drinking martinis. You got to have the PPK.
Exactly. That's why I own one. I'm not a fucking peasant. I got a stainless 1911 for the same thing too, man. All right, what's up next?
So the last one, at least that stood out to me, was number 28, and it says, "What do you believe is the biggest cause of gun violence in the United States?" And there was a whole list of questions, but the one that received the overwhelming, like the next highest, so the number one answer was decline in parenting and family values, and this is something I've harped on for a long time. That was 38.1% of the respondents said that. The next highest rated answer was 14.7%, which was parole, early release, short sentencing for violent offenders, which, okay, I'll give you both of those. But I think the biggest one is decline in parenting and family values.
Yep.
That's my personal take, just because looking at the people that I dealt with on a regular basis that were shitbags, their family life was crap. No family values. Their parents didn't do much in parenting, other than made sure there was like a minimal amount of food in the home, and that was about it. And it was kind of like the kids were all on their own raising themselves.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I do agree with the early release thing too.
Yep.
All of our brothers and sisters that are getting shot and killed, most of them are getting shot and killed by people that shouldn't even be on the fucking street to begin with.
Exactly.
And it's funny too. You look at like family values in California. You and I saw it daily, but now living in Idaho, it's a more polite society, and I think people have better family values here.
Yeah, kids hold doors open for people. They yes sir, no sir. It's entirely different from what and I lived in a conservative county. I mean, I worked in Sacramento County, but I didn't live in Sacramento County, at least not for the last 10 years before I moved. And it's still significantly different here compared to where I lived.
It tripped me out the first time a kid opened the door for me here. And I mean, literally, I was like, what's the deal? He's going to rob me when I walk in.
Exactly. He's got a bat in his other hand.
And it's sad, though, that it's become like that. But you're right. I mean, but that's why we live here and not there anymore.
Right. And we're both jaded cops, so we automatically expect almost the worst from everyone.
And don't come to Idaho because we're full now.
unless you're conservative and no, never mind.
Yeah. Democrats need not apply. Anything else that was surprising out of those? I think we pretty much covered everything possible.
Yeah, those are all the ones that at least jumped out at me. But I mean, we can put the link to it in the at least on the Facebook page when we share the podcast.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. And then most importantly, the big thing is that the politicians are coming out and saying they're going to pass a law, and then the cops are going to arrest you if you don't follow. And that's bullshit.
No, we're not.
Talk to us first. And, you can see by these polls that were done over several different years that the cops don't agree with it.
Well, these are also the same politicians who are throwing us under the bus and blaming us for everything else that's going wrong in society. So they can fuck off.
And the most important thing to take away from this is don't let the Dems pit you against the police. The police are out there every day protecting your rights, and the press, which is part of the Dem machine, aren't going to show that. And all you're going to see is the bad stuff. And I don't think people realize how much cops are really ignoring a lot of these stupid laws that they're passing. And I don't think the general public realizes how much cops are doing to help protect your right to stay armed and to enjoy your constitutional rights. So just the big takeaway, just don't let them pit you against us because we're on the same side as you.
Well, and going along with that is just don't believe the first thing you hear. Do a little research, do some digging on your own. I tell everybody because, what social media page that I run is basically dealing with law enforcement, not necessarily guns, although I do talk about guns on it as well. But it's people are under, they get the wrong impression about what cops are up to and what they're doing and what they think because they see stuff on TV. Go to your local cop shop, go to the station, talk to some cops, go on a ride along. It doesn't cost anything.
You're right. Ride-alongs are the best.
Yeah, you can see what they're doing. You get an idea of what they're thinking. You'll see more than one cop because you guys are going to sit down at dinner and you're going to go to calls together. And you can ask them questions. For that matter, ask us questions too. Send them via email. Hit us up on social media. Ask us what you think. I mean, we're one of these future podcasts. We're just going to have a list of questions that people have asked and go through them.
All right. So like Matt said, we want you to be involved with us and ask us those questions. We want you to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on iTunes. We're new. We want you to give us those good ratings so people see us. You can find out more information on everything that we talked about in the show notes. But most importantly, if you want more information, head on over to 2acops.com. That's our blog, and we write continuously about 2A issues from a cop's perspective. Most importantly, we need questions that you want answered. Let us know what you're dying to know and email us at podcast@2acops.com, and then we'll answer the best that we can. In the meantime, we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in with us. Stay safe. Have a great week. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to and rate 2A Cops on your favorite podcast service. You can subscribe to our newsletter and get current 2A news at 2acops.com. If you have any questions you want answered on the podcast, email us at podcast@2acops.com.